This week we are studying how cells get energy, photosynthesis, and respiration. We read it in the chapter. It's in the textbook, page 86 to 94, if you need to review it. We're going to go over the worksheet today. Also, we did pond observations. We're going to talk about those tomorrow. And don't forget, you should be reviewing for the unit test. And so today's quick review question was about the 6 characteristics of all living things. So moving onwards. This is what you did on your worksheet. So as a way of talking about it, we'll just go over what you did. So this first part here, the equation for photosynthesis. And let's do these questions kind of all at the same time here. So what are the raw materials of photosynthesis? That means what ingredients do plants need to do photosynthesis? Yes? Okay, so the raw materials are the carbon dioxide and water. And we'll do that in just a second. If the chemical equations are confusing for you, honestly, if you just remember carbon dioxide, because you know plants breathe in carbon dioxide, you know that plants need water, and we'll balance the equation in a minute. So that's the raw materials. You might remember that from 6th grade if you talked a little bit about chemical equations, carbon dioxide and water. And then the products means what is produced, and we find those on the other side of the equation, kind of like in math. What are the products of photosynthesis? Yes? Yes? Okay, excellent. So C6H12O6, which is sugar, also known as glucose, which is just a simple sugar. So if you remember glucose, or if you just want to remember sugar, and oxygen, we all know that plants put out oxygen as a waste product. And then, as we talked about briefly yesterday, because you can see there's 12 hydrogen molecules here, we have to balance that chemical equation. I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining that. You may have done some of it in 6th grade. You'll do it in either advanced science or in high school. It's a little more advanced stuff, but so we have to do, and then you need 6 carbons. So 6 carbons, and then that makes 12 oxygens, 12 hydrogens, and more oxygens. So we got 6 oxygens here, and then we have to add more here. And then it all balances out perfectly. We don't have any magically appearing molecules. Okay, so then the products were glucose and oxygen. Okay, now this question, why is sunlight written above the arrow rather than writing it as an ingredient, as a raw material or a product? Why is it above the arrow? Uh-huh. Yeah, the arrow means yields. It means this is producing that. And is energy an ingredient? No, energy is energy. It's not matter. It's not a physical ingredient. It's the energy that is needed to cause the reaction to happen. So sunlight is the energy needed to cause this chemical reaction. And you might remember again from 6th grade, this is an endothermic reaction because you have to put energy into it to make it happen. You're storing energy in chemical bonds. So it's taking the sunlight and it's putting these two things together, and then it gets stored in here. But it's like when you're following your recipe making cookies, it doesn't say add heat. It says you put it in the oven, and that's what makes the change happen. Okay, and this question, this I have to say is a really not very specific question, because you could answer, where does photosynthesis occur? You could answer this in one of 3 ways, All would be correct. Some are just more specific than others. So where does photosynthesis occur? Yes. Yeah, so you could, some people said in plants or in plants' leaves. Is that true? Yes. If you were to be more specific and say in what organelle does photosynthesis occur, it is more specific. In the chloroplasts. Okay, so in the chloroplasts. So the chloroplasts are the organelle in plants, the little green ones, and they are absorbing the sunlight. That's what's making the photosynthesis occur. Okay? Everybody good with this first half? Excellent. The second part, and I'll tell you, some of these are good, some of these are a little more specific than you need to know. So let's go through them, and then I'll tell you which ones are most important. So the process by which a cell captures energy in sunlight and uses it to make food is called photosynthesis. Okay, blank are colored chemical compounds that absorb light. The answer is? You know what? Chloroplast makes more sense. They're actually looking for the very general pigments, and I think they just are doing this because chlorophyll is a green pigment. So you don't need to know this. This is just a very general term, right? In art or whatever, the pigments are the colored compounds that absorb light. And so number 11, the main pigment found in the chloroplasts is, what's the main pigment found in chloroplasts? It's the green one called chlorophyll. And so generally, I will just ask you about chloroplasts, the organelle chloroplasts. You will also see the word chlorophyll. That's just the green stuff that makes the plants green. But so these ones, less important. Don't stress out over these ones, okay? All right, small openings on the undersides of leaves are stomata. And we will talk about these a little bit more in the spring when we talk about plants. But that's basically how the plants are getting oxygen, oxygen out and carbon dioxide in. The stomata, a stoma is an opening. And you can actually see, you could probably see this on the duckweed in your ponds if you get bored of looking at other things. If you look at the underside of it, you'll see lots of little cells. And within all those cells, you'll see these specially shaped cells. And if there's lots of water, they'll be open. And if there's not as much water, they kind of lose pressure and they close to keep in more water. Okay, so this, less important right now. These two, however, and again, we will continue talking about these, but an organism that makes its own food is called, it's called a what? Autotroph, or autotroph. Auto means self, and troph means food or to eat. So autotrophs are almost always doing photosynthesis. There are a few other ways living things make their own food, but we talked about this. We didn't use this word, but plants make their own food using the energy from sunlight. And then the rest of us eat other things because we can't make up our own food. And what are we called? Heterotroph. Hetero means other, so other food source. Okay. All right. Then fermentation, and again, we talked about this, respiration. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. Respiration, this is going to be a very similar question to what was on the other side. What are the raw materials of respiration? What are the raw materials of respiration? Let's get somebody different to answer my questions here. Yes. Excellent. The raw materials are sugar and oxygen, right? Because you eat sugar and then you breathe in oxygen. Excellent. And then what is produced in this reaction? The products, what is produced, are, do you have some of them? What do you got? Okay, what do you have? Oh, you've got those first two. Okay. Yes. Carbon dioxide. We breathe out carbon dioxide and water. And what's the other product? Yes. Energy in the form of something called ATP. But that's energy. So again, this, as we talked about yesterday, is the opposite of the other reaction. Photosynthesis is storing energy as sugar. Respiration is getting the energy out of sugar. Yes. Yes, absolutely. That's right. All cells do respiration because you're going to have to get some of that energy out. Yes. The sugar is glucose, which is a very simple sugar, and then the other sugar, like table sugar, cane sugar, they're just longer molecules. It tastes the same. They taste sweet. Sometimes you can actually get, like at the coffee shop, sometimes it'll actually say simple sugar or glucose. You just digest it really quickly, that's all. Hang on one second. Okay, so here, the first stage of respiration takes place where? In the cytoplasm. And the second stage takes place in the mitochondria. Now, on the quiz, on the test, if I were to ask you, where does respiration take place? I'm not going to ask you the first part and the second part. So what you need to know, it's true, it's a two-step process. Don't worry about this. Remember, we talked about the mitochondria, the mighty mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell. It's doing the respiration. It's getting the energy out of the sugar. Now, fermentation. How is fermentation different than respiration? Yes. It doesn't use oxygen, or uses a lot less oxygen. And so when your cells, or any cells, don't have enough oxygen, they do this other process called fermentation. So if you're not putting in the oxygen here, you can't have all this oxygen in the products. So what gets produced as the products are different. What are the products of fermentation? You still get energy. You don't get as much energy. It's much less efficient. But what is the other waste product that's produced by yeast in fermentation that produces? You guys should all have it written down. It produces alcohol, right? So when hops and grains and barleys are fermented, they produce alcohol. When grapes are fermented, they produce alcohol. That's how alcoholic beverages are made. So somebody first period said, well, does that mean that if I exercise really hard and I go anaerobic, then my cells would produce alcohol? Actually, no, because in human muscle cells, fermentation produces what? Something called lactic acid. And that makes your muscles a little bit sore. So when you go anaerobic, you don't use as much oxygen because it's not available. You still get the energy, it's not as efficient. Okay, these two questions, pretty easy. They're both false. This one's respiration. And this one is fermentation. And make sure tomorrow you have all of your pond stuff. We'll do one observation, and then we will talk about results.